Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. In this video I'm going to be answering another question, and this one was how to connect more deeply with La Santa Muerte. So this is a pretty common question, and it's funny because I was actually going to make a video about this. I just didn't get around to it yet. And so how to connect more deeply with La Santa Muerte. So basically one obvious way is just to work with her more often. The more often we spend time in the energy of a being, the more connected to them we become, because we become more attuned with their energy. When we do invocations, we kind of sort of summon the being into us a little bit. It's not necessarily possession. It's a it's a little different than possession, but invocation, when we do invocation, we're like kind of bringing that energy of that being into us a little bit. And by doing so, you start to kind of take on some of the energetic qualities of that being. So one way to become more, I guess, connected to Santa Muerte is to work with her a lot more often, especially with invocation. You know, a lot of prayers are kind of like an invocation sometimes. They usually state explicitly that they are an invocation. But by doing so, we're able to kind of bring forth, you know, that kind of energy into ourselves. And we start to align more with the energy signature that she has, because it starts to become, you know, mirrored in our personal energetic field. So another thing that we can do is to just spend more time venerating her, praying to her, and talking to her. Now, you don't have to pray in this manner every single day, but the more time you spend intently focused on Santa Muerte, it's like you're, you know, building a stronger and stronger bridge. For example, praying the rosary, it's a very involved task, because the rosary is a very, very, very long prayer, and it can take some people 30-40 minutes to finish it, especially if they have trouble concentrating. And you know, when you do the rosary, if you stay focused on Santa Muerte, that's a lot of time and a lot of prayer focused directly upon her. And in doing so, you know, you kind of are setting out a big vibration, you know, that calls to her and calls for her. So that's another way of connecting with her more deeply. Another way is by doing a magic with her. This is completely optional, of course, but by doing rituals and rites with her, they help you to kind of have more experiences with her, kind of more like bonding exercises in a sense. You know, that's another way of kind of getting closer with her, connecting more deeply with her. Another way is definitely meditating with Santa Muerte. Now, there's two different ways of meditating with Santa Muerte. Well, maybe three ways, I don't know. One way is by sitting at your altar in peace and quiet and just focusing on the central point of the altar. May that be a photo, a prayer card, a statue, whatever it may be, even a candle with your image on it. You know, you just focus on that and just sit in the silence and just give all your attention to the image on the altar and focus for a long time. And with any meditations, you always want to do it at least 15 minutes or longer, because it seems that studies show that 15 minutes is when the mind starts to really make a shift and get into a certain state. But it doesn't have to be 15 minutes if you can't afford to do 15 minutes. But 15 minutes would be best. At least 15 minutes. So you want to sit there and focus. And by doing so, you're really just, you know, focusing all your attention on Santa Muerte. So again, you're connecting with her more deeply in that regard, because you're giving her all of your attention energetically and mentally. Another way is guided meditations, which is where you put on the headphones or you listen to it out loud, and you have someone kind of narrating a scenario, and you imagine and feel yourself participating in the scenario. Like they might say, you know, you will see a staircase before you, and at the top of the staircase is Santa Muerte. And when you get up to the top of the staircase, she gives you a hug. And, you know, they might say something like that. or whatever, however they choose to have it. And usually these are spiritual themed guided meditations. And I don't know if there are any guided meditations for Santa Muerte. I don't think I've ever looked one up, but I imagine there probably are some. But that is another way to communicate with La Santa Muerte, is through guided meditations. It's another way to connect more deeply with her. A third way is just to kind of do a guided meditation while focusing on an image of her, but you don't even have to do that. Another way to connect more deeply with her is to keep something of her on you, maybe a small necklace, a medallion, an amulet, a prayer card, a keychain, something that you can just kind of carry around with you, and just kind of, hold it in your hands, or every time you see it, it'll kind of remind you of something more like this, so you'll think of her. So it's kind of like keeping her with you in a physical sense at all times. And in doing so, your mind goes to her more often throughout the day, which means you're giving her more mental energy, which again kind of strengthens that bridge between the two of you. Another way of communicating with, well, not communicating with her, but of connecting more deeply with La Santa Muerte is by doing research about her. When we do research about beings, we kind of subtly connect with them on a certain level. And I think that by doing so, again, this is an act that people can get very absorbed in while they're doing it, which is good because it means that this being is getting your undivided attention. When you spend time researching and studying, with Santa Muerte, there's a lot of research and studying to be doing. This can take the form of you buying a book about Santa Muerte, or checking one out from a library if you can find one in a library, and just sitting down and reading for however long. Whether you read for hours or just a few minutes, that's still another way to connect more deeply, especially if you're a devotee. Spending time to read and research about how different, communities venerate Santa Muerte, how she's worshipped across different countries, how, different things like that, reading about, or even reading about the different robe colors, doing research about, the different types of rituals that involve Santa Muerte. That's another potent way to connect with her. So even if it's just doing research about the symbols of her, like what does the pregnant Santa Muerte represent? What does the scythe of Santa Muerte represent? These kinds of things, when we become very much absorbed into them, we give more of our attention to the being that we're researching. And I think this is definitely a really easy way to connect more deeply with La Santa Muerte. Another way, which is more towards the left-hand path a little bit, is with necromancy. Now, this isn't included when I say doing magic with Santa Muerte, because most of the magic with Santa Muerte isn't necessarily would fall into the typical category of necromancy. It's usually just magic to have a certain outcome, like to find love, to make more money, to find a better job, to feel a little bit more healthy. In that regard, those are more daily, day-to-day kinds of magic and rituals. But when I say necromancy, I mean like left-hand path kind of necromancy, like necromantic spirits. This could be grave workings. This could be summoning and working with the dead with Santa Muerte at your side. Now, the path of necromancy can be dangerous because it involves, death energies, which are kind of toxic to living people because, their energy is that of death. It's death essence. And obviously, when you work with Santa Muerte in a typical way, you're not necessarily really being exposed to like that too much. It's not really something you really worry about too much, generally speaking, especially if you do everything the way you're supposed to do it, like set up your altar properly, cleansing, things like that. When you work with necromancy, you're inviting that energy into your life. You're really like diving deep into it. So, when it comes to necromancy, there are very specific ways of going about it. It's not really something you just kind of dabble with. It's really a specific path that you kind of devote yourself to. It's a spiritual calling, it's a spiritual path, and it's not made for everyone. It's not meant for everyone. But if you do feel called to necromancy, or if you do practice it, then doing it with Santa Muerte, absolutely you will connect much more deeply with her, because she is a being of death. She is, she is somebody who gives off the death essence, and she really could help you on your path, you know, through necromancy, and help you kind of initiate into all of that. So she could be a primary guide if you choose to initiate into, you know, an underworld plane or through necromantic path workings. So that's a different way of connecting with her, but it is another very potent way of connecting with her. Another good way of connecting with Santa Muerte would be through divination, and that is using tarot cards, using a Ouija board, using a pendulum, using runes. These are ways of kind of getting messages from Santa Muerte, kind of learning with her, kind of being able to have more of a back and forth with her, and you know, further taking this a little bit further would be something like channeling, you know, which is either channeling out loud through possession, where she would possess you and you would speak all the stuff out loud while you're recording, so that way you could play back the video and write down the information. Or the way I normally channel would be through writing. So I ask a question and I let the answer come to me in my mind, write it down, and later on after I channel, I go back and read all the stuff, and it's usually like I'm reading it for the first time. It's like I don't really register what I'm writing down, and then afterwards I go back and I read it and I learn a bunch of things. It's my favorite form of communicating with her. I think it comes in second place, only to clairvoyantly seeing her, clairaudiently hearing her, which obviously is probably the easiest and most like direct way of talking to her. I mean, you can also achieve this during dreams. I guess there are some rituals and rites in some books of Santa Muerte to initiate a dream involving La Santa Muerte. You don't have to do this in order for her to come to you in a dream. I've had dreams with her where she came to me in the dream and we interacted, but it is possible to initiate a dream or initiate a meeting with her in the dream state. Or if you know how to astral project, you can astral project and connect with her there, so that you can talk with her just the way I'm talking to you. You can talk to her directly, like another person just standing right in front of you. And that's one way to communicate with her. Another way to connect more deeply with her is to have more casual moments with La Santa Muerte. I think a lot of the time people can be very formal with working with her. Like when they go to the altar, it's all business all the time. And one thing I like to do is I like to go to the altar, I like to do the opening prayers, you know, and assuming I'm not doing any ritual, I call it prayer time. I call it my communion time, my devotion time. So after I say all the formal prayers, then I view it as having the floor is open. I can just say whatever I want. And I will just talk about anything and everything. I will talk about problems I'm having in relationships with like friends or coworkers that are being rude, or, you know, things I'm worrying about with money or with like health problems of family members, things that I'm trying to strive for with my personal growth, fears that I'm struggling to overcome, things from my past that I can't seem to really shake or get away from, problems with guilt or self-confidence or self-doubt. You know, I will talk about anything and everything. I'll also very excitedly talk about projects I'm working on, my goals, my aspirations, where I aim to be further down the line. It's almost like a free therapy session in a way. And maybe I'm not hearing all of her replies back right then and there. It's still really nice to have a 100% safe space to really say everything I truly feel, completely unfiltered, with no burden or worry about being judged. And this is very, very casual, chatty kind of conversation, very, very informal. And it's one of my favorite parts of having my devotional time with Santa Muerte. So when we work with her, you know, it doesn't have to be so formal all the time. And also, some people only talk to her when they're at the altar. And this is something I had to learn for myself, is that I don't always have to be at the altar to call on Santa Muerte, to ask her for guidance, for help, for strength. when I'm out and about and something's going on and I need, I need to feel a little brave or a little confident or just a little bit more sure of myself, I can call out to her, wherever I am, even if it's just mentally. If I do it with enough intention, I know she hears me. And she can be there to give me that little boost of energy or, that little bit of mental strength to get through the day if I need it on, no matter where I am or what I'm doing. So that's another good way of connecting with her is by incorporating her more into your daily life and into your daily routine. So these are just some of the ways of connecting more deeply with La Santa Muerte. I think, talking about her is really nice to do, but we don't always have people to talk about her with. So sometimes just, whether it's just sharing stuff about her in the comments on videos or on forums, or sometimes even creating artwork or music, because all of that is a process that takes time, and all that time that we spend creating in the creation process, our attention is kind of going towards Santa Muerte. So it's kind of fortifying and kind of strengthening that bridge between us and her when we do activities that are time consuming, that take time and energy to create, that are basically acts of devotion to her. So these are just some of the ways you can communicate with or connect more deeply to La Santa Muerte. These aren't the only ways you can connect more deeply with her, but these are some of the more common ways that I can think of off the top of my head. So if you found some of this information helpful, then by all means drop a like. And if you want more content like this, then absolutely subscribe, because there's plenty more where this came from. If you want to support the channel, then I will have a link to my Patreon in the description below. That being said, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you found this very informative and helpful, and I will see all of you in the next one. Take care.